Suzuki is a really popular vehicle here in Australia, and they make really good cars, which is why I'll be keen to get in one when I get the opportunity. So, as ever, it's on its way to Australia, but a little bit later than some other countries. It will be released in Europe first and soon after Australia. We don't really have any dates though. Thanks for joining me. It's really nice to see so many people subscribing to the channel. I'm Ben Alexander and I talk about the latest EV news around the world, and I make videos every single day, so stick around until the end and then let me know your thoughts in the comments. It's about time we saw some small Japanese EVs coming to the market, because some of the best quality comes from Japanese brands such as Toyota, Honda, Suzuki. Really well-made cars, last for a long time. That's why the used car market for these cars is still really, really strong. Even now, when they have over 200,000 kilometers on them, they're selling for, like a Honda Jazz here in Australia right now, 200,000 kilometers on the clock. We're talking 17, 18 years old. They're sometimes going for $6,000, £4,000 if you're in the UK. So it would be amazing, I think, to see if they keep this pretty low spec, fairly cheap, fairly basic shopping cart type stuff. But I'm really only 50-50 on this at the moment, because we can see that most EVs that have been coming out in recent years, and I know this is starting to change, are generally quite flashy, quite expensive, with the exception of some brands. BYD, of course, have the BYD Seagull. That's another video I just made, so I'll put that in the description below if you want to know about the BYD Seagull, which is basically a £10,000 or $19,000 really good electric car with a 200-mile, 300-kilometer range, and then 400-kilometer range, 300-mile range if you get the higher spec one for a few $1,000s extra. Some brands that have made the investment and managed to get their vehicles to Europe and now Australia to sellers for more reasonable money. I'm sort of talking about cars in Australia, for example, under $40,000, which is still a huge amount of money. I know that some people can afford to go out and chuck 40,000 at a car, but for most people, that's a huge amount of money. It's like if you have mortgage payments, it's like mortgage payments for a year on a nice house. It's a huge amount of money. So as far as we know, it's not a fancy looking car. We've seen pictures. I'll put them on the screen now. It's modern, but not super posh in my opinion. So when we look at the concept, it doesn't look too posh to me. It just looks pretty, like a pretty basic car. Kind of like the Toyota BZ4X. But sort of Suzuki's version of that, and I think smaller. So when we see the images from the charger, or the charging station that were leaked from Europe, I'll pop them on the screen now for you. You can basically see that it's a really nice thing. It's said to have a 60 kilowatt hour battery by the person driving that day, which is perfect. I think that makes sense that they would do that. I don't know what chemistry the batteries will be. Nobody knows, and nobody knows about the power either, and we don't know about the charging speed either, so there isn't much we do know. But we know from the launch in January, the concept for it is 4.3 meters long, so it's about as big as the Dolphin. If you know the size of the BYD Dolphin, that is a modern small hatchback, so a tiny bit bigger than a Honda Jazz. That's it. So this is basically a Honda Jazz size car. And 1.6 meters tall, which is very close to the Honda Jazz again. So it is basically in the small SUV group, and that does make it smaller than the current Suzuki Vitara and S-Cross. So if you ask me, they have my interest. That is a small, cheap sounding car. That's kind of what I like, I like a lot of the EVs, that's fine, but I really like the cheaper ones. And I think a lot of people are keen to see more of these small Japanese EVs come to market. But as it is now, this is pretty sad. Toyota are in deep bother with investors, having expressed their concern for the company being so slow with moving to EVs. But this is going to change too, because we recently heard from Toyota with their new boss. After a very long time, the old boss of Toyota, who was called Akioda Toyoda with a D, not a T, he resigned and let a much younger guy take the lead. So they are now taking a bit of a a new start. They've reignited this thing. They're actually going to start trying to make some EVs and produce their own cars and batteries too. So Toyota are going to do this. More on that, I think, in the next few months. As for Honda, this is pretty sad. I don't think this is common knowledge yet, but Honda, they're obviously quite slow. They did make the really highly rated, fantastic Honda E, even though it had a small battery pack relative to a lot of other EVs. We do know they can do it. They can make nice cars, but they aren't in a hurry to change things to upset their business model. They've obviously got an element of status quo going on. One thing that they did say publicly is that they want their EVs to come, but they don't want to just sell it and it to be over with unless it needs a repair. They want to try and monetize through other ways. And when asked about it, they did sort of suggest that they want in some way to look at maybe people who own a Honda EV in the future to pay some sort of monthly fee, particularly with inside features and maybe the charging speed. That basically made me lose about 50% of my respect for Honda, because I naturally don't like that sort of thing. That's not very good. That's a bit like the Chinese company NIO when they said that they want their vehicles to be like smartphones. I'm not really on the same page as them, clearly. I'm sure some people will be. I don't think that's a good thing for anyone if our cars are so full of internet and screens and you start to view your car like a device or a bit of tech rather than a vehicle. For example, like a smartphone, because really smartphones have not really proven to be healthy for us. It's more of an unhealthy thing, although it's very practical and they're very useful. But what are your thoughts on this? I know that it's a modern thing, times are changing, so things aren't always going to stay the same. We're not in the 80s anymore, clearly. We obviously now have screens and internet in our cars as standard these days often, but it makes me kind of a bit sad, the thought that things might become a bit more like smartphones in the future. I suppose for me it's nice to drive and feel like I'm driving on nice roads, and it's like an escape from screen time, an escape from videos and internet and work. That's for me how this feels. So I like the idea that the windows can be wound down, you can drive around and have a little cruise around in the countryside. Thank you to the people that have joined on Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon or YouTube memberships. Links to these will be in the description below. The cheapest and easiest way to help is by simply pressing the like button for me. If you could do that, it'd be great. Remember to subscribe for more daily videos about EV news around the world.